that everyone is clear about what the first question is asking you. One of the things that you'll see as we move along, and if you read in your textbook on page 338 and 339, or 348 and 49, is that muscles are part of kind of everything. They're part of your blood vessels, your heart. They're in your thoracic cavity, that's where your lungs are. They're in the digestive tract. They control the flow of urine out of your body. They're most recognized for movement, but the idea is that muscles help you do basically everything else that happens in your body. Even sometimes things that you are not consciously in control of, muscles are helping you do. So hopefully you all have the word homeostasis defined. Homeostasis is the idea of having a constant internal environment. And so your muscles help you do this because your muscles do all of these things. For example, your muscles, like your textbook said, allow the temperature of your body to stay constant because they produce a bit of heat every time cellular respiration is performed. So for question number 1, what I would want you to be able to say for sure is that you could define homeostasis and that you could give an example of something that muscles do that helps your body keep its environment constant. So your textbook mentions a bunch of things. It focuses quite a bit on internal temperature, and then it lists a bunch of other things at the end about all of your body systems that use muscles. The thing that I want you to recognize is you don't actually control most of those muscles. You only control the muscles that are attached to your bones, which is the kind that we'll focus on. Question? Muscles themselves are not really the insulator. Fat is a better insulator than muscles, but muscles are producing the heat that your body's trying to conserve. So I'm going to show you some things that I would say about the 3 types of muscle. So take a look at what you already have and see if this matches up, and if there's something that you don't understand, I'd be happy to answer your questions. The first thing that I like to do is think not just about muscle type, but I like to think about where I find it in my body, because I find that that helps me categorize better what I'm talking about. So for example, in most body systems, you'll see that I have smooth muscle. So under the description of the function of smooth muscle, you could have examples from realistically any body system except the one that's involved with muscles attached to your bones. Cardiac muscle is found only in your circulatory system. Specifically, it is what makes up your heart. So that's a very specific muscle, and that's the only place that you have cardiac muscle. For skeletal or striated muscle, the key is bones. You have a skeleton that is made out of bones. Your skeletal muscles are attached to bones. And that's how you can distinguish between the types of muscle, where they are. Are we in your heart? Well, then it's cardiac muscle. Are we anywhere but we're not attached to a bone? Well, that's smooth muscle. Are we attached to a bone? Well, that has to be skeletal muscles. Now, the next thing that I did in my little chart here was I gave some examples of functions that muscles do, and I'm being very specific here. What you'll see is that as we go through this entire unit on human physiology, we'll talk about each of those things. That's why I used them as examples. But if I was to sum up for smooth muscles those 3 things, my question would be, can you voluntarily control the pressure in your arteries? Can you voluntarily make peristalsis happen in your intestines? And can you voluntarily change the volume of your thoracic cavity? Now the answer is no to 2 of those. Your respiratory system actually has smooth and striated muscle. And so one of the things that you'll see is that sometimes things are involuntary, and that's what I'm trying to get at here. All of those things are involuntary. That means that they happen without you doing anything. Sometimes an involuntary thing could also become voluntary if it becomes something that you're consciously thinking of. For example, breathing. Most of the time it's involuntary. That means that smooth muscles are taking care of it for you. But if you think about it, you can control your own breathing. You can make yourself breathe faster. You can make yourself breathe slower. And that's because you actually have a combination of smooth and striated muscles that are accomplishing this task for you. So when we're talking about smooth muscles and things being involuntary, keep in mind that they don't have to be involuntary all the time. As long as they happen automatically sometimes without you thinking about it, we would classify them as involuntary. When we talk about functions then, in the circulatory system you have cardiac muscle, which composes your heart. So basically it's making your heart beat. Anything that your heart is doing to push blood throughout your body would be the function of cardiac muscle. So for cardiac muscle, keep in mind this is also involuntary. So you're not thinking about your heart beating. You're not saying, okay, heart, beat right now, boom, boom, okay, it happened. It happens all by itself. The last type of muscle, the skeletal muscle, these are our voluntary muscles. Now, does that mean that all the time I am consciously thinking about them doing something? No, it means that I'm in control of the movement there. Could someone open the door back there? I'm in control of the movement most of the time. I can make my skeletal muscles move involuntarily by accomplishing a reflex. Reflexes aren't going to be the focus of our unit right now. That's more of a Biology 30 topic. But just so that you know, when we say voluntary or involuntary, we really mean most of the time. Most of the time, skeletal muscles give us a voluntary movement. So I can be like, arm, move this way, and it moves because I made it do that. Now, are you actively thinking about it? No, a lot of your muscles have muscle memory, and they will move not because you're thinking, okay, right foot go, okay, left foot go, but because your brain knows that when I'm trying to get over there, my legs are supposed to walk. So even though it's voluntary, it doesn't mean you have to be thinking about it all the time. So that's function. Now let's talk about appearance. Here are some pictures of what the muscle cells look like. Your textbook has pictures as well. What I'd like to make sure you recognize is the visual difference between different types of muscle. So for example, I'm just going to make a little list down here for cardiac, skeletal, and smooth. Do you notice, for example, that cardiac and skeletal muscle are both striated? That means there are bands of light and dark in it. Have you ever eaten a turkey and noticed that there is white meat and dark meat? This is why, right here, depends what kind of muscle fibers there are. So cardiac and smooth muscle are both striated. They would have bands of light and bands of dark. Smooth muscle is not. It's not striated. There's not bands of light and dark in it. So that would be the first visual difference that you would notice. The second thing that I want you to take a look at is the number of nuclei. Cardiac has 1, smooth has 1, but skeletal muscle has many. And so it seems like on each characteristic there's an odd man out. Smooth muscle is not striated. Skeletal muscle has many nuclei. Those are visible differences between those types of muscle cells. Does anybody want to ask any questions about the functions of muscles, where I find them, or what they look like? So if I was showing you pictures of muscles and you wanted to tell the difference, those are the two characteristics you need to look at. Cardiac muscle is striated, but it only has one nuclei. A smooth muscle is striated, but it has many. A smooth muscle is not striated, and it only has one nuclei. So with those two characteristics, you should be able to tell muscle cells apart. You should also be able to tell them apart based on whether they're voluntary or involuntary and where you would find them in your body. Does anyone have any questions about muscle cell types? Yes. Oh, that's a good question. So peristalsis, which we will discuss, peristalsis, for example, happens in your intestines. Peristalsis is the idea that muscles push your food along your digestive tract. If you have ever tried to be upside down and swallow something, you'll see that you can do it. And that's because it's not gravity that's pushing the food down, but actual little muscles in your esophagus and your intestines, really through your whole digestive tract, that push the food along. So it doesn't matter which way you're facing, muscles are doing that work. Does anyone else have questions that they want to ask here? Yes. She wanted you to be proper, I guess. But scientifically, it's not gravity that's making it happen, it's muscle movement. All right, so I just want to make sure everybody understands what the answer to question 3 is, which asks, why do skeletal muscles work only in pairs? And the main idea is that they can't push, they can only pull. So muscles actually only work one way. And you might say to yourself, no, you're dumb. I can push things with my muscles. That's great. You're pushing things with a combination of your bones and your muscles pulling on your bones to make them do things. But your muscles themselves can only pull. And the idea is that when a muscle contracts, which means that it gets shorter, so anytime a muscle contracts or shortens, it pulls on the bone that it's attached to, and that's why muscles are always in pairs. Each time one of the muscles contracts, the other relaxes. And so I've got a nice example here to show you how you and a bug are basically the same. You have the same deal in your leg muscles. So there is human muscle, bug muscle. And if you look, there is an extensor and a flexor muscle in the top part of the leg of most organisms who have leg muscles. The top muscle, the extensor muscle, is the muscle that you would use to kick your foot outwards. So sit there and think about it. If you're sitting flat and you want to kick your leg outwards, which muscle are you using? It's your quad, the one on the top of your leg. And if you were ever unsure, think about what it would feel like if you had a whole bunch of weight. So you were using a machine, let's say at the gym. When you use the machine where you have to lift your leg up, it is your quad muscle that hurts. So your quadricep is the extensor muscle. It makes the bottom part of your leg kick out. Your hamstring is your flexor muscle. That's the muscle on the back of your leg. So think about if you were standing still and you wanted to kick yourself in the butt. That would be your hamstring muscle that you're using to kick your leg up backwards. Anytime you have muscles attached to bones, they work in a pair like that. And so you could find examples all over the place. The other day I asked you to look at your biceps and your triceps muscles. That's the front and the back of the top part of your arm. Your biceps and triceps work the same way that your quadriceps and your hamstrings work. When one of them is pulling, the other one has to relax to allow your bone to actually move that way. Just as a side note, does anybody know what the bones are called that these muscles are attached to? They're pretty big bones, yeah. Your shin is the lower muscle, so your quadriceps and your hamstring are attached not really to your shin, but more to your knee, which is the joint that it's attached to, but the bone that they're actually on top of. That is your femur. Kind of sounds like lemur. And I'm pointing this out because a lot of times things in your body are named for a bone that they are next to. And so when we talk about your circulatory system, I will mention your femoral artery. It's the artery that runs right beside your femur. Does anybody know what the muscle on the top part of your arm is called? It's funny, yeah. It's called the humerus. Oh, that's good. This isn't a laughing matter. It's called your humerus. So when you hit your funny bone, it's because you're hitting this spot right where your muscles are attaching to your bone. That's where your biceps and triceps are. They're over top of your humerus. Yes? There is. So one of the things that I'll mention is that muscles are not directly attached to bones. They're attached to a tendon, and the tendon is attached to bones. And it's your humerus tendon, actually, that is your funny bone. It's not even your bone. It's a tendon. So before I move on from here, and so I'll show you the basic visual thing that I would want you to recognize for the next few questions. If you look in your textbook, there's this great picture that starts out with a big circle, shows a piece coming out, shows a piece coming out of that, and so on. And right beside that, there's a little chart that lists the levels. And so question 4 asks you, what are the levels of organization in a muscle? So if we start with the biggest one as being your muscle, notice how I'm not really making a very detailed picture here. I'm just going for basically size. Your muscle, if you look at the picture, is attached to a tendon and then to a bone. This is very anatomically incorrect. I'm just trying to give you the general visualization here. And then if I was to take a muscle, take one little section of it and blow it up. That's what this picture is trying to show. So we're not trying to illustrate that it's a big long string of things. All of these pieces are actually all inside of your muscle. And the picture in your textbook is just trying to show what it would look like if we enlarged every section. So we start off with the big muscle, and then the next thing on your list is the muscle fiber bundle. Muscle fiber bundle. So in each muscle, you'll see there's a bunch of circles. We've taken one of them and expanded it. That's a muscle fiber bundle. In each muscle fiber bundle are, again, a bunch of little pieces. If we take one of them and expand it, that is a muscle fiber. This is a muscle cell. And I want to point that out while we're right here so that everyone is very clear. When we say muscle fiber, that is a muscle cell. That means that muscle cells are very long in length. Now the next level shows us some things that are inside the muscle fiber. And so if we take this and we expand a little bit more, and we take another section, we'll see that in each muscle fiber, so each muscle cell, you'll see a bunch of little circles again, little groupings. What we talk about as the next level are the myofibrils. And then that again can be split apart into myofilaments. So we'll get into what each of these things has as its function when we talk about muscles contracting, but I wanted you to get an idea of the size, which one is the biggest and which one is the smallest. This is a question where order would be really important. This is something that I would say, hey, here are some terms. Put them in order from biggest to smallest or smallest to largest. That would be something that I could ask you so that I could determine if you knew the level of organization in a muscle.